Story 1. My friend has been talking to this man for 4.5 years. They have hung out maybe 5 times. Usually they just hook up and he leaves. He only texts her at certain hours because of his work schedule. He never plans dates, and when she tries to plan, he bails. I constantly ask her why she keeps talking to him and whether she really believes they could be something more than an occasional friends with benefits situation. She says she really likes him and wants to be with him. I wholeheartedly believe he has a wife and children. Story 2. This is recent because my piece of shit uncle just died. He was convicted of raping my cousins. There were photos and videos of the crime, but none showed his face. My grandma insisted until her death that my uncle was innocent. She favored him over my dad, who was actually a halfway decent person. My cousins tried to tell her. She shoved one of them away and told her she was a sick little girl. They eventually told a teacher. Story 3. My ex's mother moved to Las Vegas from Europe. She went broke from gambling over a period of about 10 years and was practically homeless. Then she was injured on a casino escalator and was generously compensated with a life-changing settlement. Guess who went broke again, mostly at the same casino? Story 4. My dad has progressive supranuclear palsy and dementia. My mom refused to acknowledge that it was a developing problem because it was an inconvenience to their lifestyle. I confronted her because he needed to have his driver's license taken away. He was a danger on the road. My dad impulsively went out one day, bought a BMW without her present, and later drove it under a semi-truck. Not surprisingly, that was when she realized he was unwell. I also had to learn about his accident from extended family because she did not want to give us the satisfaction of being right all along. Story 5. My mother, who has since died, refused to wear glasses because she hated how they looked on her. She insisted her eyesight was not that bad and that needing us to read menus for her at restaurants was just a cute quirk. Story 6. My mother and father divorced 26 years ago. It was a toxic marriage, and it was probably for the best that they parted ways. Since then, she remarried and is happy with her new husband. We all get along, and my parents maintain a cordial relationship for visits and for the grandchildren. To this day, my father wants to get back together with my mother. I don't blame him if he still loves her, but he is in denial. He believes he did nothing wrong in the marriage. He thinks he was the perfect husband and that he would be doing her a favor by taking her back. The reality is he did not treat her well. She left, and she is now with someone who makes her happy. Story 7. I have a friend in his 50s who makes next to minimum wage. He drinks and eats too much. He and his girlfriend, who is in her late 60s, live with a mutual friend. They are discussing adopting a child. Story 8. Buddy keeps complaining that normal guys will not respond to him on dating apps and that he is getting hit on by creepy older men. He is nearly 60, and those are age-appropriate matches. Story 9. A nurse who thought the lump in her breast was not important and the open sore was also not important. Once it started draining, she still dismissed it despite dressing it daily. Co-workers confronted her after the smell became so rank it lingered where she went. She had stage 4 cancer with metastases to the bones and brain and died soon after. She was the manager of the oncology unit. This was a case of living in denial. When confronted about her odor, she admitted to the sore but still thought it was nothing. She agreed to go to the emergency department with a colleague and friend only to reassure them. An oncologist was consulted in the emergency department and she became distraught when cancer was mentioned. She insisted on receiving all possible treatments despite there being no hope. She died within a month and never left the hospital after being confronted about the odor. Story 10. Ilaria Baldwin remained committed to her fake Spanish accent, even after being outed as born and raised in Boston with no Spanish heritage. Story 11. A friend is an alcoholic who uses cocaine nearly every day, often binge drinking and using cocaine until 7 in the morning. He becomes short of breath when standing for long periods, but he believes he is fine because he is thin and his liver enzymes were within the normal range. Story 12. A person with severe hearing loss insists he has to say, "What?" all the time because everyone mumbles. Story 13. My loving yet abusive and alcoholic father told me that he had no problems to fix and that any trauma I experienced in childhood was a product of my sick and twisted mind because he was nothing but good to me. Story 14. A friend was diagnosed with diabetes 10 years ago. He has a needle phobia and is afraid to prick his fingers to monitor his blood sugar, so he does not and instead says he eats healthy. Because of blood sugar fluctuations, he gradually went blind and his kidneys failed. He spent 3.5 years on dialysis and then received a kidney transplant. Home with a new kidney, he remains afraid to prick his fingers and decides he will manage his diabetes by eating healthy, just as he did for the past 10 years. Story 15. I am a teacher. I have many parents in denial about their children's grades or behavior. I once had a student headbutt me and break my nose because he could not go to recess at that moment. The parent insisted, but he is an angel at home, where he is only ever playing on a tablet. I also have one parent in particular who has 4 children, and all of them have behavior problems to the point of multiple suspensions or being moved to different schools or teachers. After 4 children with issues, is it not possible that you might be part of the problem? Story 16. My dismissive, avoidant mother was a master of denial. The worst was when she developed an abscess in her pelvic area. She was in 10 out of 10 pain, could not sit up, and was white-knuckling a body pillow while lying on the couch, unable to move for a week. When I was 10 and suggested she go to a doctor, she insisted, "Oh no, I am fine. I do not need to see a doctor." She scheduled an appointment with a specialist and waited about 10 days for it instead of going to urgent care. She drove herself there in severe pain. The doctor took one look at her, told her to put on a gown, and meet the doctor downstairs for immediate surgery. They drained a large amount of pus, and she required gauze packing to heal the crater left behind. It is a miracle she did not develop sepsis. In her 40s, she suddenly became allergic to ibuprofen and turned beet red after taking it. Instead of going to the doctor, she went to her hair appointment as usual. The hairdresser refused to cut her hair and insisted she go to the doctor. My mother went home and lay on the couch until the reaction subsided. She told me the story as if it were perfectly reasonable. Story 17. My brother has been married 4 times. My mother blames all his ex-wives, but I keep pointing out that her son is the common link in every divorce. Story 18. A close friend had an opiate addiction, and her husband believed she needed morphine infusions for a variety of suddenly appearing painful ailments. Story 19. My sister wears flannel shirts, has very short hair, drives a Subaru, and wears a battle axe necklace. She has a pile of Sports Illustrated swimsuit editions and a lesbian pride flag in her room, but my mom still has not figured out that she is gay. Story 20. That would be my father. My mother was manic depressive, as it was called back then. She had several major breakdowns during my childhood. Every time he acted like nothing was wrong, she would be screaming and throwing things, and he would just try to placate her. It never worked. A couple of times I pointed out that she needed to be committed. He always responded that a person could not be committed unless they were a danger to themselves or others. That was true, but she obviously was. I was terrified of her. Even apart from the breakdowns, she had rage attacks at the drop of a hat. In my 20s, I found out that they had 2 children before me and that she had drowned them in a bathtub during a psychotic episode. What I never discovered was how she got released or why she was able to conceive me less than a year later. A friend was with me when I found out. He told me later that he had always thought I was exaggerating when I said I had feared for my life as a child. I could not blame him. It does sound outlandish. After that, it was even more baffling that my father thought we were safe living with her. Story 21. I know a man who tested positive for the human immunodeficiency virus about 11 years ago. He pretended it did not happen and did nothing about it. Today, he is dying of acquired immune deficiency syndrome. He is not even 40. So sad. Story 22. All the nonprofits I have worked for that are supposed to help low-income people mostly employ low-income staff. Story 23. I had a friend who never held a job. Their parents paid for their cars, 6 years of college, and an apartment in a very expensive city for 3 of those years. They also built an artist studio for them, yet my friend was convinced their family was not wealthy. Story 24. My mom's logic was, it is not incest since you were both adopted. My brother is 6.5 years older than I am and sexually molested me from the time I was 6 until I was about 10. We were both from an orphanage and were adopted 6.5 years apart. While it is factually true that it was not incest, the power dynamics were absolutely wrong. Story 25. Me thinking I will get in better shape and lose some weight while doing literally nothing to make it happen. Story 26. A short list of my parents' greatest hits. They bought me a pride flag patch at age 16 because I told them it was a symbol of God's promise to Noah. They ignored their teenage daughter's sudden change after she turned 18. Short red hair, a pride flag pleather jacket, a binder and boxer briefs, and an internship at a gay youth organization. When I later won a gay scholarship to university, they said it was good I was taking money away from gay people and pretending to be an ally, but that they could not drop me at the acceptance ceremony because they could not be that near gay people. They told me to get a woman to drop me home because gay men are perverts. The older butch woman who dropped me home was very amused. I have now been living with my wife for 10 years. I have been on testosterone for about 1 year. I am a non-binary lesbian. We live just down the road from my parents, so they see us come by. My parents are still convinced that I am straight, single, a Christian virgin, focused on my career, and living with flatmates. They also say the drop in my voice is a sign that I am aging badly and need to buy eye cream. Story 27. About 6 to 8 years ago, on a visit home, my always slightly soft, not quite chubby brother was impressively thin. My dad, the quintessential almond dad, was raving about how proud he was that my brother had lost so much weight, that he packed his lunches, had a physically demanding job, and had been working hard at it. I asked if he was sure, and my dad was absolutely sure. It was extremely clear to me even then, and as I learned about 5 years later, that had been the first year of my brother's heroin use. Story 28. My elderly friend has fallen 4 times, once breaking 2 ribs, once breaking a wrist, and sustaining bruises on the other occasions. He still refuses to use a cane out of male pride. He cannot understand that we all age, and if he keeps falling, he will end up with a broken hip, bedridden and miserable. Story 29. My mom was complaining about her niece's sister-in-law, who went back to a man who encouraged her drug use and physically abused her. My mom kept calling her stupid and said she could not believe she was doing that. The woman had been in several other relationships with the same abusive dynamic. I thought about pointing it out, but it was Christmas and I was not in the mood to spoil the holiday. Story 30. Probably my boyfriend's mother. They live in squalor and have ruined their house by neglecting responsibilities for over 20 years. They will not allow anyone inside because it is so dirty. The property is full of junk cars, poison ivy, and stray trash. She brags about their house and how much money they have, yet personal property taxes have been overdue for 5 years. They eat out for every meal because the kitchen is out of order. She is an alcoholic and dependent on marijuana. Story 31. My mother has been a smoker for 40 years. She was diagnosed with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. The good news is that she can pay $400 a month for an inhaler that makes her feel better. She does not need to give up smoking. Story 32. My mother, diagnosed with diabetes more than 20 years ago, has become convinced that insulin is making her unwell and she no longer needs to check her blood glucose levels. Needless to say, she is heading toward her 4th hospitalization in 6 months. Cool, Mum. Story 33. Hoarding. If you can no longer see the floor or any counter space, you have a problem. My great-uncle refuses to throw things away. He is not as bad as the people on television shows, but he has so much stuff everywhere that he neither needs nor uses it. It makes me anxious to see a dining table you cannot even sit at. Story 34. My mom is now 63 years old and has had rheumatoid arthritis since her early 30s. She had 4 children after age 30. She denied she had any diagnosis and went to every chiropractor, Chinese healer, therapist, and naturopath in the area. She even tried acupuncture and magnets. She spent over $100,000 trying to cure her chronic pain that public healthcare in my country would have treated for free. For the last 4 years after I moved out at 18, She barely left her chair, only going to the bathroom. She didn't even sleep in her bedroom because of the pain. Her feet were swollen and her fingers had become crooked from the arthritis. She eventually developed pressure sores from not moving. We had to carry her to the bathroom. When she stood up, she bled so badly from her wounds that it sounded like a dam breaking. I'll never forget stopping my little brother from cleaning her blood off the floor and telling him to go to his room, seeing the despair on his face. She refused to admit anything was wrong and was convinced she just needed to find a magic cure. She eventually became so ill that I feared she would die at any time, so my brothers and I convinced her to go to the hospital. She agreed and said she would go at the end of the week. That day she worsened so badly I had to call an ambulance because she could not get off the toilet and was bleeding heavily. I'll never forget cleaning up the blood and helping her change into her favorite dress, because she didn't want to look bad in front of the paramedics. The hospital diagnosed her with rheumatoid arthritis, severe iron deficiency, 2 wounds 10 centimeters deep, post-traumatic stress disorder, and a bacterial infection that could have killed her. She would have died within a week if she had not gone. She spent 6 months in the hospital. For 4 of those months, she could not feed herself, so I went every day to give her dinner. She was moved to a care home. She is still unable to walk but can feed herself now. She still will not admit out loud that she has arthritis, but she is much happier and loves living where she is. Story 35. My mom said, "There are no gay people in India." She wondered why a friend's son was not interested in meeting any girls, and I explained that he is gay. Story 36. My family was devastated when my mom was diagnosed with a hereditary, incurable cancer with no survival beyond 4 years. We all thought she would beat it, but she was gone within a year at 55 years old. No amount of good diet, exercise, or education can overcome bad genes and life's unfairness. Although the facts were clear, it still felt like a freight train hit us. Story 37. A woman posted in a relationship subreddit a few days ago, seeking to reconnect with her 2 adult sons, whom she had not spoken to in almost a decade. She said she was a good mother and that there was no reason her sons would refuse to speak with her. She was perplexed when commenters urged her to be introspective and consider what she might have done, because people do not stop speaking to their parents for nearly a decade without a reason. Story 38. My stepfather's coworker had 3 vasectomies. Each time, his wife became pregnant and he insisted the doctor had somehow botched the procedure. After the 3rd vasectomy, she became pregnant again. The doctor told him there was nothing left of his vas deferens and asked whether he had considered that she might be cheating on him. Story 39. My dad married a man and then turned around and beat me because I said I was bisexual. Story 40. My older sister, 39, has 4 children and has lived in our parents' house without paying rent since she became pregnant at 17. Her oldest was practically raised by our parents. She received much financial and emotional support from them over the years. She says she never receives any help from our parents, that she does not feel welcome at home anymore, and that our younger sister and I are favored. Story 41. I don't know, but immediately above this on my feed was a screenshot from Grindr where someone said, "Honestly, I have no interest in men. Sex is just sex to me." Story 42. My sister is convinced she has a mysterious ailment that no doctor can diagnose, and that is why she has lost an absurd amount of weight. She forgets to mention that she constantly snorts Adderall. Story 43. A former friend comes to mind. She lives with her husband, 3 children, and her mother. The total household income is only $2,000 a month, and rent is $1,500. They are 3 months behind on rent, but she says it is okay and they will not be evicted. The reason for falling so far behind is that they bought a second car even though they cannot afford it and do not need it. She spends $600 on glamour photos and gets her nails and hair dyed at the salon once a month. She does not realize how serious their financial situation is. I feel so bad for the children. Story 44. My sister wanted to dress up as a backwoods hillbilly for Halloween. Her costume idea included a fake pregnant belly, a can of Bud Light, a cigarette hanging from her mouth, and a black eye. It would have been a funny, albeit slightly offensive, costume if she had not recently completed a pregnancy during which she smoked, drank alcohol, and took Suboxone. Thank God her baby was born without major complications, although the baby did experience withdrawal symptoms from Suboxone. Story 45. A woman I went to school with and remained friendly with for many years has never had steady employment and lives on government benefits. She had her first child and moved frequently after being evicted for failing to pay rent. She spent her money on unnecessary items, and Child Protective Services placed that child in permanent foster care. She repeated the same pattern with 2 other children. She is now 40, and her 3 children have no relationship with her. She continues to be evicted frequently and spends money on unnecessary things. She believes she is a good mother and blames others for her problems. It is very sad. Story 46. My dad doesn't want a hearing aid because he thinks it will make him look old. I tried to tell him that what makes him look really old is mishearing things all the time, but he didn't hear me. Story 47. This is me when I thought I could help my mother and that it was my job to make her happier. She ruined her life and made the choices that got her where she is today, and she continues to make poor choices. It took years for me to realize there was nothing I could do except call her occasionally and say I love you. It is not my fault she lives the way she does. Story 48. There are 2 kinds. One is hoarders whose homes are messy, dilapidated, and filled with unnecessary, disgusting items. The other is people with unaddressed, massive debt who keep spending money they don't have and get new credit cards when they max out. I'm not better than that. In fact, I broke free of both situations at the end of last year. It was truly eye-opening. Mental illness can rock your life from the inside out without mercy if left unchecked and untreated. Yikes. Story 49. I am in a medical statistics program. These statistics for a population in Mississippi were depressing. 85% of the target group lives on a household income of $35,000 or less per year. 85% of the same target group believes that medical funding for the poor does not do any good and should not be spent on helping them. This is alarming. They do not seem to realize they are among those being offered help and use the mindset of system justification to exclude themselves from recognizing that they are poor. Story 50. Denial is incredibly useful. The clearest example I have seen was during 2022 with my husband. His melanoma progressed to stage 4, but he had no pain and felt fine until the final week of his life. We had a great time together. He did not want anyone to know he was ill until he felt sick, and because he did not feel sick until that final week, no one knew. He went back up north that summer for a few weeks to visit his brother, friends, and his mother, and he truly had a great time. We took a trip to Mexico, and 2 months later he died. My goal that year was to feed him everything he liked and make him laugh. I succeeded. Thank you, denial, for making his last year special. Story 51. Broadly speaking, some parents assume their children are very smart because they can use a tablet. He can tap to play the next video, but he is nearly 5 years old and cannot count or recognize letters, and you kept him out of preschool because you thought he was not ready. Maybe reevaluate what is important. Story 52. The husband in the documentary There Is Something Wrong with Aunt Diane. Story 53. Some people meet someone online, become convinced they are soulmates, and send large amounts of money even though they have never met in person. The other person keeps giving reasons to avoid meeting at the last minute, yet the victim continues sending money, sometimes even hiding cash in cereal boxes or other packages after previous transfer attempts were intercepted by authorities. They do not realize it is a scam. Dr. Phil features many of these cases. Often a scammer's profile picture belongs to an innocent person who appears on the show to say that the person in the profile picture is them, that it is not their name or profile, and that they can confirm others have been scammed. Victims often still deny it and insist the scammer is real. I feel sorry for these victims. They are clearly desperate for love and affection, and someone is taking advantage of that. Story 54. One of my colleagues constantly shouts and roars at her class to the extent that I worry she is a competency hearing waiting to happen. I have witnessed it. It is aggressive, red-in-the-face bellowing, often over things that most of us would not even raise our voices about. She does not see it as an issue because she says she is a naturally loud person. Story 55. While my father was dying in the hospital, my sibling and I were taking a break with our mother at her apartment and discussed what my father's wishes would be. My mother said she was really hurt because my father had not named her as his first appointed decision-maker in his advance healthcare directive. My sibling gave a strange look, went into the other room, and returned with the directive signed by my father, listing mother first, then my sibling, then me. My mother looked at it and said loudly, "Well, it still hurt." Apparently, it was more important for her to take the role of the victim and nurse a non-existent grievance against my father than to accept the truth. I have kept this as an example of how people can deny reality to meet their own distorted, inexplicable needs. Story 56. Someone I knew lost her dog to a disease. She convinced herself the dog had been taken to a farm to frolic in the grass. She could not accept bad news. Everything had to be good, and bad things simply did not exist for her. If she became aware of bad things, she would lash out at everyone, blaming them for making her feel horrible while she felt she was rotting. It was a clear delusion. Story 57. 12 years ago, my aunt and uncle convinced my parents to buy thousands of dollars worth of Iraqi dinar because they said the value would rise and the family would become wealthy. My mother tells me every few years that she has read a recent article claiming the dinar will increase in value. I feel bad that she continues to hope. She could really use financial relief, but that is unlikely. Story 58. Eddie Van Halen developed oral cancer and refused to quit smoking because he said the cigarettes were not what caused the cancer. Story 59. My sister's daughter is 18 and has a very strict diet of yellow or brown foods. She does not eat vegetables or fruit and has never once eaten anything green. Her meals are limited to chicken nuggets, hamburgers, fries, and boxed macaroni and cheese. She will not try new foods. At a restaurant, she ate a single peanut, which surprised my sister. She rarely talks to people, reacts very strongly if someone speaks too loudly, becomes easily overwhelmed, and cries when anything in her home changes. My sister refuses to believe she is autistic. My sister is an excellent cook and a professional baker. She prepares the family meal but also makes a separate meal for her daughter, who tends to eat alone in her room because she becomes upset if anyone talks loudly during dinner. Story 60. My grandmother lives alone and fell. Luckily, she had access to her phone. She lay on the floor for 4 days and had a normal phone conversation with my father during that time. A delivery driver found her. She is fine now. Story 61. A man I know refused to admit he was living beyond his means and insisted his life was stable. He had a new Ford F-150 pickup that he paid about $900 a month for because he had traded another truck he still owed on. He also financed a zero-turn mower, a camper, and an outdoor wood furnace. He had to check his bank account just to see if he could afford lunch. He had 3 children and worked 2 full-time jobs, never seeing his family. He started one job at 7 in the morning and the other at 4 in the afternoon and did not get off until midnight. He repeated that schedule every day. When he lost one job, he lost everything, including his credit. Story 62. Unfortunately, my grandparents are both 96. My grandmother has severe dementia, cannot get out of a wheelchair, is in constant agony, and barely knows who anyone is. She just sits there, occasionally recalling a memory from her life that is irrelevant to the current conversation. But at least she is not angry or suffering that type of cognitive decline. My grandfather is nearly blind and his legs barely work, but his mind is sharp as a tack. He was in the army, and he cannot accept reality or the situation at hand. He refuses help beyond a caregiver who comes in a couple of times a week. My grandmother wets herself because he cannot help her to the toilet. He almost burned the house down the other day. My mother happened to stop by and rescued them and the house from the flames caused by his attempt at cooking. He cannot even tend to his poor wife because he himself is so impaired. It is almost neglect. We do not know what to do. We want him to get a live-in caregiver, but he has outbursts, cries, and manipulates his children to get his way. He would die before going into a care home, and at this rate he is going to kill them both accidentally. What can you do when someone is so stubborn? It must be hell to experience, but his refusal to face reality is heartbreaking to watch. I feel like the grandparents I loved died long ago, I am just watching the echo of their lives play out in tragedy. If I ever get like that, just take me outside, face me toward the sunrise, and put a bullet in the back of my head. Nobody deserves to die with so little dignity. Story 63. My best friend struggled with alcoholism. He was an intelligent, top-tier athlete who began drinking because he did not want to face problems he needed to address. He is in rehab now, and I am hoping for the best. Story 64. A friend's mother constantly lets her 15-year-old son chug massive amounts of soda, stay up until 3 a.m. on school nights playing video games, and ignore his homework. He is getting straight D grades and is overweight for his age, but the mother refuses to do anything because she insists she is a good mother and calls her older child, my friend, ungrateful. My friend left home at 17 because of his mother's extreme narcissism and controlling behavior toward every aspect of his life. Story 65. There is a home box office documentary called Something Is Wrong with Aunt Diane. It describes a terrible car crash caused by Diane Schuler in 2009 that killed 7 people, 4 of whom were children, when she drove 80 miles per hour the wrong way on the highway. It was determined that she had a blood alcohol concentration of 0.19 and had smoked tetrahydrocannabinol a few minutes before the crash. Her family was adamant that she had a stroke or another medical reason for the crash. They paid tens of thousands of dollars to repeat toxicology tests. The results were the same. She had a problem and nobody in her family would admit it. Watching the denial in the documentary was infuriating. Story 66. Someone I knew was dating a woman who broke up with him and then moved to another country without telling him. He told me he saw this as a good sign for their relationship. Story 67. I went to visit my mom at the hospital for a minor surgery and heard her roommate, who had stage 5 lung cancer, complaining about the doctor pestering her about her smoking. She said she knew someone with the same disease who never smoked in her life and that this proves smoking has nothing to do with it and it is just bad luck. Story 68. My wife's extremely abusive parents are baffled that each of their children leaves the moment they turn 18 and cuts them out of their lives. There's definitely something wrong with the kids, right? Story 69. Any man 40 or older getting upset with his 18-, 19- or 20-year-old girlfriend for being immature. Story 70. My aunt thinks she has been in an online relationship with Russell Crowe for the last 2 years. She recently divorced her husband after he found out she had been talking to him again. She left her family over Christmas to spend 2 weeks with him in New York City, and, unbelievably, Russell Crowe's plans changed at the last minute after she had been there for 3 days. My aunt has autism. She is in her late 60s, is overweight, and has not brushed her hair in 20 years. Story 71. Nobody wants to work when rent has doubled in 10 years, but wages have barely risen. Story 72. I identified as straight until my early 30s. By that time, my history included a secret high school boyfriend, bottoming for a man in what I considered the best sex I had ever had, significant non-straight pornography habits, and downloading and uninstalling Grindr a handful of times. I think the nature of the bisexual cycle really clouded things for me. Story 73. This is the situation I am dealing with right now. My wife's grandmother lives with us and is probably never leaving. We moved to my wife's hometown so her grandmother could stay with us for a couple of months while the basement of her house was renovated so she could live there. Stairs are no longer a good fit for her, and she wanted the basement redone so she could continue to live as normal a life as possible. Her son, my father-in-law, and his wife also live in the house, so the plan was to renovate the basement first and then the other floors. Grandmother started staying with us, and 2 months turned into 3, 3 into 4, and so on. It turned out my father-in-law did not hire a contractor. He had his construction buddies doing everything, which meant he did not get permits. That is how a year and a half went by. He also decided, because he was foolish, to do the first floor and not the basement. At the year-and-a-half mark, they finally had the first floor done, added new siding, and gutted the basement. 2 days after they finished gutting the basement, my father-in-law was arrested as part of a drug bust and had a large amount of cocaine on him. He has been in prison for the better part of 2 years and is still waiting on a full court date. It turned out the drugs were how he was paying for the renovation, which is why he was having friends do it under the table. My wife's grandmother is in denial. She refuses to believe he had drugs and believes she will be able to return home in the near future. I can tell this is weighing heavily on her because my wife and I are expecting our first child and we need to start making decisions for our own family. This is only the tip of the iceberg. If I wrote out everything she has been in denial about over the past 2 years, it would end up on the New York Times bestseller list. Story 74. I used to work with a woman years ago who was clearly pregnant, but she denied it. I thought, what the fuck ever, if she said she wasn't pregnant, fine. Did she look pregnant? Yes. Did I think she was probably lying? Yes. But I didn't care. I felt there was a reason she didn't want to admit it, so I went along with it. Shockingly, she had a healthy, beautiful baby. The only reason I can think she lied is that she was a smoker and never stopped. She didn't want people to judge her for smoking while pregnant. We judged her anyway. Story 75. My dad is in his 6th marriage. The first 3 wives cheated on him, the 4th was a terrible choice, and the 5th left because she got tired of how he treated her. He has only met the 6th wife in person once. They married over Zoom in a double proxy ceremony. He lives in Maryland, the officiant was in Montana, the only state in the United States that recognizes double proxy marriages, I think, and she lives in Vietnam. This came after several months of him sending money to random people on dating sites. At one point, he genuinely believed that Lana Rhoades was in love with him. Despite being the world's most popular porn star at the time, he was convinced she needed him to send her $500 and add her to his phone plan because she messaged him on TikTok and said she wanted to kill herself. Story 76. This is about my nan over the past couple of months. For context, she is the most selfish person I have ever met. I am convinced she may have a sociopathic disorder because her behavior is not normal. My grandpa passed away on Wednesday from terminal cancer. I am not very close to him, so I am not deeply affected by the situation. We have known for months that he was terminal. It was not sudden. My dad, his only child, found out today that they had prepared almost nothing for his death. They had not discussed a funeral, had not taken steps to make the transfer of assets to my nan easier, and had not told her where any important documents were. She did not even know whether he wanted to be buried or cremated. My nan has been in denial this whole time. Anytime my dad tried to bring anything up with my grandpa, she would shush him and tell him not to talk about it. She behaved as if everything was normal. She would get angry at my grandpa for not eating properly and for sleeping a lot, as though he was not literally dying. She tried to make him eat takeaways and heavy foods as if everything were normal, even though he could hardly swallow. She refused to have a hospital bed in the house because of the aesthetic, saying it would look terrible, as though that mattered. In a way, it is sad and could be a coping mechanism, but given how selfish she is, it would not surprise me if it was simply because it was inconvenient for her to face the truth. She refuses to do anything other than continue as if everything were normal. She acts as though her life is a show and everything revolves around her. She seemed to believe that pretending things were normal would make them so, which is a childish mentality for someone in their late 70s. The whole process has been baffling, and the worst part is how much it has affected my dad and his mental health. It has taken a huge toll, and it has made me very angry with my nan for not being sympathetic or caring toward my dad. Edit. My grandpa was by no means a saint either. He was far from a good father to my dad and held many awful, bigoted viewpoints that I strongly opposed, but he never did anything terrible to any of us and put up with a lot from my nan over the years. The least he deserved was some care and compassion from her in the end. Even worse, she was not home when he died. She had gone out to the shops. He died completely alone, which I think is very sad. Story 77. My childhood best friend became an alcoholic in high school and never recovered. He relapses and drunk dials his old friends, including me, because he cannot make new friends. He drinks alone at home. We have all cut him out at one time or another. He blames everyone else for his problems, including friends and his brother, who stopped contacting him when it became too much. He is too far gone to realize that we told him to his face that he needs to stop drinking or we are done with him. He still calls and leaves long voice messages, even though I have not answered his calls or texts in over a year. Story 78. My mom refused to admit that my dad was an alcoholic. Getting drunk almost every night was perfectly normal, I guess. Story 79. A cousin of mine weighs over 500 pounds. He eats an entire jar of mayonnaise as an afternoon snack. He had to buy a scale from a medical office supplier because a normal scale cannot handle his weight. He does not think he needs to do anything about it. He is not young anymore, and severe obesity shortens life expectancy. Story 80. My mother-in-law refuses to accept that my brother-in-law is dangerous and insists he has never hurt her, even though we have all seen him do it multiple times. I did not understand denial, and, to be honest, I never thought it was real until I met her. She is so set on her belief that he is harmless that when I set boundaries to keep him away from my son, she ostracized me from the family for being unreasonable and chose not to see our 5-year-old over her 34-year-old immature son. Story 81. My father, despite being left by his wife and both children, none of whom speak to him anymore, insists to this day, more than 10 years later, that he is an amazing father and loves his children endlessly. Aside from being a terrible person, he abused all of us and the dog, physically and verbally, and has stalked us multiple times. There is a lot more to unpack, but that is the gist. His friends are living in delusion because they all believe him. Story 82. One of my childhood friends does not want to accept that his wife has had several affairs during their marriage. He looks the other way. Story 83. As soon as I walked into my family's house after a year away on deployment, I took one look at my sister and immediately knew she was pregnant. I was shocked and blurted out, "Oh my God, you're pregnant." She immediately ran upstairs in tears, and my stepfather, whom I despise, started his usual dickhead yelling at me, saying she was just bloated and it was water retention, and that I was an evil fuckwit for pointing it out. She gave birth a few months later, just after she turned 13. The second time was when my mother got cancer. Again, I came back from deployment, and as soon as I saw her, emaciated and dragging an oxygen tank behind her, I knew she had weeks, if not days, left to live. I came to find out that my stepfather had pretty much abandoned her and was in complete denial that she was dying. They lived in a huge house, and he left her locked in a room in one wing by herself every day while he lived on the other side of the house, having friends over and working as if she didn't exist. I immediately contacted my flight commander, explained the situation, and was granted leave to care for her. I spent a month living in the same room with her and caring for her until she had to be hospitalized. My stepfather and I were there when she passed, one on either side of the hospital bed holding her hands. When she died, I took one look at him and walked out of the room without a word, leaving him to wallow in self-pity. It was self-pity in the grossest possible way. When he finally had to acknowledge that she was gone, he framed it as if he were the victim, saying that God killed her to punish him. Story 84. My aunt, who despises anything to do with government but relies on Social Security, had the audacity to tell me the government should not be involved because it will end up messing things up. Story 85. My mother's former best friend lost her son to heroin. Her husband posts online as if their son were still alive. The couple insists on including a photo of the deceased in everything and encourages his young nieces to do the same, even though the nieces never met him. The deceased man's father also posts as if his son were still alive and enjoying life with the family. It has been 13 years since he died. My mother stopped being friends with the woman because she took her aside to say that her son was using heroin. The deceased man's mother was offended that my mother would even suggest such a thing. 2 months later, she found him dead from an overdose. She never forgave my mother. Story 86. Regarding my alcoholism, I know it is an issue, but every day at 5 I convince myself it is not. Story 87. My cousin is clearly 5 months pregnant, but her mother insists she and her boyfriend are not sleeping together. Story 88. Our reliance on advertising and its perceived value versus its actual return on investment is problematic. Many industries depend on advertising to work as we imagine. While it is not completely without value, it is often overvalued, and if its wastefulness were fully acknowledged, almost every media outlet and website would be unable to sustain itself. Story 89. The Schuler family from the 2009 Taconic Parkway crash, despite being repeatedly told by professionals that Diane was both drunk and high, Remain convinced she was not. Story 90. We had to put grandma on ice when she died of coronavirus disease because my in-laws did not want to leave Florida early. Leaving early would have meant they could not cross the Canada and United States border again to resume their snowbird vacation once they returned to Canada, because they were unvaccinated. We were also not to talk about how grandma really died, because old age is easier on the palate than pneumonia from coronavirus disease and drowning in her own fluids, completely alone. Story 91. The person who raped my partner during childhood was accused of raping at least 3 other people. He was convicted only once, after he was so bold at a fraternity party that he assaulted someone in front of multiple eyewitnesses who testified at his trial. He has recently been released from prison. His mother believes he is the innocent victim of a smear campaign, saying that all the victims are out to get him, despite the fact that they have never met one another, and that he and my partner had a misunderstanding and are still friends. Story 92. I never knew this until I grew up and asked whatever happened to them. My aunt's sister was a schoolteacher. She became pregnant and married very young, raised 2 sons, and then divorced. One son lived on his own at 18. The other lived with his father at 13. She met a very conservative Jewish man and was terrified he would not date or marry her if he knew she had been married and had children. So she lied about her children and disowned them, the children she had raised and who loved her. She converted to Judaism and married him, and did not invite her sons to the wedding. My whole family went. No one told her husband about the sons who lived in the same area. The older son was shot and died a few years later. She told her husband he was her nephew when they went to the funeral. She had 2 children with her husband, one adopted and one born through surrogacy. Her husband eventually found out about her first 2 sons and somehow forgave her. I do not know the details. They are still married. The child born through surrogacy recently overdosed and died, and she was devastated. Yet she never acknowledged that her much older son had also died. I do not know what happened to the second son, who was the same age as me. I still cannot believe our whole family went along with this. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.